Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Civil Rights Museum. I have the privilege of serving as the Director of History here at the museum. It is an honor to welcome as we gather to commemorate the 60th anniversary of one of the most consequential yet often overlooked chapters of the modern civil rights movement, James Meredith's 1966 March Against Fear. Just 2 days ago, on June the 25th, we celebrated the 93rd birthday of James Meredith. His courageous decision to march alone from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi was an extraordinary act of conviction. Mr. Meredith believed that fear had become one of the greatest barriers preventing African Americans from exercising their constitutional right to vote. His march challenged that fear directly. 60 years later, the questions raised by that march continue to resonate. How do we ensure equal access to the ballot? How do we protect civic participation? And how do we confront fear, misinformation, and division within courage, truth, and community? These are simply not historical questions. They remain part of our ongoing conversation today. Today, we are fortunate to hear from individuals who not only witnessed this history, but helped shape it. Their experiences remind us that history lives not only in documents and photographs, but in memory, testimony, and experience. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Dr. Aram Goudsouzian, and welcome our distinguished panelists, Dr. Flonzie Brown-Wright, Dr. Daphene Chamberlain, and Mr. Charles McLaurin. Just a brief about our distinguished panelists. Dr. Goudsouzian is the Bizot Family Professor of History at the University of Memphis, where he writes and teaches about 20th century United States history with a focus on race, politics, and culture. Two of his books, Man on a Mission, James Meredith and the Battle of Ole Miss, and his specific book, Down to the Crossroads, which chronicles the 1966 March Against Fear. And he also is one of my former professors, Dr. Aram Goudsouzian. Dr. Daphene Chamberlain, a Mississippi native who completed her undergrad at Tougaloo College and earned her master's and PhD from the University of Mississippi. She herself has presented on research on children's participation in the civil rights movement nationally and has been featured on panels and documentaries focused on historical memory, preservation, and have facilitated teacher workshops across the nation. Dr. Daphene Chamberlain. Dr. Flonzie Brown-Wright, a native of Farm Haven, Mississippi. She was inspired to become involved in the Mississippi civil rights movement following the assassination of Medgar Evers in 1963. Her inspiration continues of creative community initiatives across the country. Her appointment to the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission as an investigator was confirmed in 1974, and she was the first African-American female in the year 1968 to be elected to a public office in Mississippi since perhaps pre-Reconstruction. Dr. Flonzie Brown-Wright. And last, but certainly not least, Mr. Charles McLaurin, born in Jackson, Mississippi, who joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1962. He had the privilege to work with so many civil rights leaders, including Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer. In 1964, Mr. McLaurin directed the Sunflower County Freedom Summer Project and was a representative of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Let's give a round of applause to our distinguished panelists, and I'll now welcome them to come onto the stage for the panel discussion. We're going to go around. We also have Mrs. Flonzie Brown-Wright's book, Looking Back to the Move Ahead, which you can see right behind us.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be here. My name is Aram. I'm a professor at the University of Memphis. to be here at the Civil Rights Museum talking about the Meredith March Against Fear is a special event for me. I've been affiliated with the Civil Rights Museum for some time now as a board member, and I feel like it is, among the most, if not the most important institution that we have here in Memphis. Before we get into a discussion with our esteemed panelists, we have a treat for you. We're going to show you a preview of a documentary film that's still in the works. It's called End of an Era, James Meredith and His March Against Fear. It's produced by the Benjamin L. Hooks Institute for Social Change at the University of Memphis. The director is Daphene. He's here. And it's just a short preview, and that will help familiarize us with the march if we don't know much about it, and it can help to launch our discussion. So without further ado, thank you.
I've always considered myself an American first. All American citizens are entitled to certain rights and privileges. Since I do not enjoy all of these, I can use every resource at my command. See that the day comes that I and all of the others who don't enjoy these do enjoy them.
James Meredith had always grown up believing that he had a special destiny.
He's most famous for having integrated the University of Mississippi. Less famous for 4 years later, commencing on the largest civil rights moment nobody's ever heard of.
And he's always had this idea of leading this solitary walk of one man rather than a mass march.
That part of it is a stroke of genius.
There were significant reasons to not be involved in the Meredith March Against Fear.
There's some reluctance of some organizations to join.
Once the Civil Rights and Voting Acts bill passed, what they planned, they accomplished. So what else was there left for them to do?
We've got a president who's sympathetic. We must never go against the White House.
I mean, Roy Wilkins is not going to join, right? That's not going to happen.
But we had not wanted Meredith to even start the march.
And on the second day, he was shot. By that evening, the news was reporting James Meredith had been killed. The reporter on the newswire heard shot in the head as shot dead.
After Meredith was shot, the march continues in his name.
And that it should be a different focus than what Meredith had.
It was a lot of reporters and a lot of FBI agents.
It becomes exactly what he didn't want it to become. It becomes a mass march.
It was a battle between the old guard, nonviolent people, and those that was about to bring the smoke.
The day after James Meredith was shot, every significant figure in the civil rights movement is gathered in this motel room in Memphis.
So core, Floyd McKissick, King from SCLC, and then Stokely Carmichael. Because now the more militant wing of the civil rights movement in front and center.
They see the Meredith March as best defined as a primarily black march.
I'm not going to beg the white man for anything that I deserve. I'm going to take it.
In the middle is your Martin Luther King.
And I'm not going to let my oppressor dictate to me what method I must use.
It needs King's his appeal to the better nature of Americans.
Let me say first that this march is nonviolent.
But it also needs Carmichael's kind of grassroots energy, right?
Mr. Carmichael, are you as committed to the nonviolent approach as Dr. King is? No, I'm not.
I think that's the moment where we see those tensions between the established civil rights elite and all these other voices.
Time for running has come to an end.
It went from a simple march to something legendary.
You tell them they shot all the rabbits, they're going to deal with the mess.
But when they got to Greenwood, oh my God.
We want black power. We want black power.
More African-American activists are thinking less in terms of racial integration and more in terms of black empowerment.
But that it was simply a question of power. Only type of power we can have is black power.
King was always very reluctant to use the slogan of black power. In fact, is urging them that as they head into this last week of the march, that the leader should stop using the slogan of black power.
Is that we see increasingly with each year the expansion of black voices, the expansion of black participation and ideas and visions about what should happen next.
The Black Power movement bled into cultural Americana.
During the 1970s, we get black promoters. You'd end up with black filmmakers, black writers, black power and the black arts movement, black people in the mass culture, into politics, into various businesses, right? Black is beautiful,
You know, we call it blaxploitation cinema in the 70s on television.
If it wasn't for James Meredith having the courage to do this and getting shot and surviving and allowing the march to continue in his name,
There probably wouldn't be a Black Power movement.
looks good, right? At the end of today's event, John Riley is going to say a few words about the film and about its making and its continuing process. So, as the film alluded to, Memphis plays a role in the Meredith March. In fact, this building itself, James Meredith leaves to begin his march from the Peabody Hotel on June 5th, 1966. And he marches to the state line on that first day. After he, of course, contentious negotiations here at the Lorraine Motel in room 307 among all the major leaders of the civil rights movement about the future direction of the march. Meredith left with two stated aims. He said that he wanted to encourage black people in Mississippi to register to vote. Again, this is 1966. It's a year after the passage of the Voting Rights Act. And you're just starting to see for the first time any kind of significant black voter registration in the state. And his second aim, which the name of the march itself, was to challenge what he called that all-pervasive fear that black people in Mississippi faced. If he, James Meredith, the hero of the Ole Miss crisis, among white people, perhaps the most despised black man in Mississippi in 1966, if he could walk down Highway 51 from Memphis to Jackson and encourage people to vote, then that should raise people's sense of courage. That was his aim. Of course, on the second day of his walk, he's just south of Hernando, Mississippi. He's just been in the town square. He's been greeted by the local black community, which has promised that they would register to vote and encouraged him. He's very buoyed by this. And he's almost ready to call it a day in terms of his marching when a white man emerges from the gully, a man, in fact, from Bartlett, named Aubrey Norval, and raises his shotgun and shoots 3 times and wounds James Meredith. He doesn't kill him, he wounds him. And it's from that moment on that what became one person's march becomes a mass civil rights extravaganza, one that involves Stokely Carmichael and Martin Luther King and wraps up the politics of President Lyndon Johnson, but also affects people in every town in Mississippi through which it passes and beyond. Right? It's march, most famous, of course, for introducing the slogan of Black Power. Right? And that comes from Stokely Carmichael and from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We're very privileged to have a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, here with us in Charles McLaurin. So my first question is for you, Mr. McLaurin. Can you tell us a little bit about the nature of your work by 1966 as a grassroots organizer, 2 years after the Freedom Summer Project, and then as the march begins, how did that intersect with your work?
Yes, I started out with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in a little town called Rouville, Mississippi. After being involved with Medgar Evers in Jackson, Mississippi, taking part in a few demonstrations, I was assigned to work with a local group of African Americans in Rouville who had decided that they wanted to organize a voter registration effort, and they had contacted Bob Moses and local NAACP leader up there in the Delta, Amzie Moore. After Amzie Moore brought us, there was 3 of us that Bob brought. He introduced us to the black leadership in Rouville, and we started out organizing, knocking on doors, talking to people about registering and voting. The Delta was sharecropping, and it was mostly agriculture, and cotton was the main crop. And most of the people who lived in and around Rouville either lived on a plantation or they had homes in town, and they would go out to the plantations during planting and harvesting season and work. So our project started out with one big trip to the courthouse, Indianola, from a mass meeting that was held. This lady, who we didn't really know at that time, we were asking people who were willing to go to the courthouse and register, and this lady gets up, and it's Fannie Lou Hamer, and she is on a bus. We take a bus load of people to Indianola. She's a part of that group. There was 18 of them, and after they had taken the literacy test in those days, you had to be 21 years of age to register to vote, and then you had to pass this literacy test of over 20 questions. And one of the sections of that literacy test, you had to read, write, and interpret a section of the Mississippi Constitution that you would draw out of a hat or box or the registrar would give you. And so after my first few days there, and I began to wonder why the state of Mississippi, which denied African Americans education, you have to, for the basic right to vote, you've got to be literate to the point that you think about a section of the Constitution, any Constitution, the United States Constitution in any state, lawyers are arguing about what these sections mean. And they're asking people who, in many cases, have limited education, if any at all. So that became one of the parts of the program that the local people had there that we've got to try to work on. And so we got to have some kind of strategy. SNCC is in there working, Medgar is in there working, CORE is in there working, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, National Council of Negro Women, and a lot of indigenous organizations, voters leagues, and all get together, and we form an organization called COFO, Council of Federate Organizations, and that organization is an umbrella under which all of the organizations would pool the resources of their organization for a single hit on the state of Mississippi, because now we realize that one organization alone trying to fight in Mississippi are using up all of their financial resources, and so we bring these together, and under COFO we start to develop the strategies of freedom vote, freedom registration, Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. We bring in hundreds of young people from across the nation in Freedom Summer, and 3 objectives we had was to continue the voter registration effort that we are already part of, to set up freedom schools and freedom centers, and to organize the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party would challenge the seating of the regular all-white Mississippi delegations in the National Democratic Party Convention in Atlantic City in 1964. So we now had something that we're working with, and what we needed to do was in order to bring some of the lawsuits we filed, we had decided to run 3 candidates for congressional office. Fannie Lou Hamer in the 2nd Congressional District. Mississippi had 5 congressmen at that time. And we're going to run Fannie Lou Hamer in the second, that's the most populous district of the 5. And then we're going to run up Mrs. Annie Devine in the 4th district, and Victoria Gray in the 5th. What we're going to do is we're going to have our freedom vote, and the result of that we're going to use we're going to document it, and then we're going to bring all of these records and everything to Atlantic City and present to the party, the Democratic Party. But what we had to do first was get past the credentials committee of the Democratic Party. So Dr. King and Fannie Lou Hamer and black pharmacist Aaron Henry spoke to the credentials committee. But Mrs. Hamer's testimony was the strongest of any, and as a result of that, we got a chance to hear from the President of the United States. The Mississippi get involved with Lyndon Johnson, as you know, is the President of the United States as a result of the death of Kennedy. But in 64, he wants 4 years of his own. And so he was really upset that we were there challenging the white power in Mississippi. And he wanted to make sure he didn't lean too much toward our effort, because he felt that he would lose the support of the good old boys of the Democratic Party in the South. Dixiecrats, they called themselves. They didn't even identify as Democrats and support of the Democratic Party. So one of the things, we were going to, if we didn't get the credentials, we wanted to have a floor fight. And we felt that the floor fight, we had support, really, from numerous delegations, Michigan, Detroit, Illinois, New York, California, and various other states had given us the go-ahead to, if we got a floor fight, that they would support us. So the Democratic Party did not vote that year. You know, they didn't have the convention. They had the convention, but they did not have a roll call. Lyndon Johnson was selected as the Democratic Party nominee by acclamation. And so the Mississippians were asked, once Johnson was nominated, he's the Democratic Party presidential candidate. The Democratic Party asked the Mississippians to support the Democratic ticket, and they refused. And at that time, the governor, Paul Johnson, called them and told them to come home. They went home. Our people stayed around, got into the convention. Most of those delegations that had agreed to support us gave us their credentials, and we were able to get into the party. But then Johnson sent Hubert Humphrey and Walter Mondale. You know, Hubert wanted to be vice president. And so Johnson had him come talk to the Freedom Democratic Party delegates. And they offered us what they called a compromise. Not 2 seats. They offered us a compromise of 2 seats, but not 2 seats in the Mississippi delegation. 2 seats at large, they called it, really representing nobody. So we didn't take that. We knocked that down and partied up there with everything for a while. But what we did get out of that effort was the National Democratic Party put in a new rule that in the future, all delegations must be representative of the population back in their state. And so in 1968, 4 years later, what we do is we put together what is left of the Democratic Party. All of the mostly Democrats in Mississippi, white Democrats, voted for Goldwater. And they left the Democratic Party and left the splinter group back there. So what we did was we put together a group made up of the Freedom Democratic Party delegates and of the white Democrats who remain Democrats. And we go to the National Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968, and we were able to unseat the regular Democrats with this group called the Loyalists. So from that day to this day, mostly the Democratic Party in Mississippi is made up basically of black people. And so we have, with all of these Republicans in office at every level, I don't think Doc and Dr. Flonzie, you can tell me, I don't think there's a Democrat holding any office in the top echelon in the state. There's not a single Democrat, so it's all Republican. So what we have now is what was the solid Democratic, Dixiecratic Mississippi in the South. We've got the Republican Party, and we know where the Republican Party stands at this day with their national leader.
Mr. McLaurin, if you take us to 1966, this is SNCC is the organization that introduces the slogan of Black Power that becomes part of the national consciousness, right? Stokely Carmichael is the new chairman of SNCC. You're an activist within SNCC as well as the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party at that time. What did Black Power mean on the ground, so to speak, like to someone like you in Mississippi in 1966, and how did it connect to the work you were doing?
Well, I was actually on the stage with Stokely Carmichael when he called for Black Power. In fact, we had just got him out of jail. The Fannie Lou Hamer, who had been on the Meredith March early, asked me to go to the Grenada, Mississippi, and meet with Dr. King and the leadership and ask him to bring the Meredith March through the Delta. That march was originally set up to march from here to Jackson along Highway 51. But Fannie Lou and the rest of us felt that we needed to bring it through the most racist area of Mississippi, which was the Mississippi Delta. So I met with Dr. King and Carmichael and the rest of the people there, Dr. Abernathy, Dr. King, and we decided we'd bring the march from Grenada, taking Highway 7, which runs kind of southwest from Grenada into Greenwood, Mississippi. Greenwood was where the SNCC operation in the early 60s had big headquarters there. We had done a lot of work in Greenwood, and so we're going to put the marches up in Broad Street Park. That was our aim, one of our aims. The main aim was that after Stokely talked to leaders, the black leaders, we're going to try to get Stone Street Elementary School playground. So Stokely goes to the black leadership in Greenwood. They give him permission to put the tents up and allow the marches to stay the night. But as Stokely is trying to place these tents, the white power structure had a meeting and had sent the police down to the park and to tell Stokely that he could not erect the tents, that there was no going to be, the marchers were not going to be able to be there. And of course, Stokely decided he's going to put the tent up anyway. So he started putting up the tent. Then he was arrested. He's in jail. I was a part of a group that Stokely had sent to Mississippi Valley State University to talk to Dr. White, who was the president, about an alternative site if we had needed it. Of course, Dr. White called a press conference. He was flanked by about 10 white state troopers, and he ran us off of the campus, and we wasn't able to be there. So by the time we get back to Greenwood, Stokely's in jail. The marchers are on their way to Greenwood, thinking that we've already have a place for them to put up for the night. So what we just did, I had worked in Greenwood a lot, especially after Medgar was shot, was assassinated rather. And two of the other guys who was with me, and Cleve Sellers of SNCC, we decided that we was going to take Broad Street Park. Broad Street Park is in the middle of a black community in Greenwood, and the streets open on all sides. So what we did was sent one of the group, which was with us, was the forward group, back to the marchers and tell them that we're going to stay in Broad Street Park. And we had designed a special route for them to come right around through the black community in a way that they could wake the community up. You know, we told the people that Stokely is going to be speaking at Broad Street Park, and come on out. And we told a lot of young people and to go and fill up the park. So the Catholic priest in Greenwood bailed Stokely out of jail. We go to pick him up. Oh, he's hot, man. He's really raving. He says, the black leadership gave me the permission to use a black campus at a black school, and the white power denied it. We can't do nothing that white folks can't overrule. We need some black power. So we get him to the park. Oh, that park now is just like we had envisioned. I mean, people, black folks were all around that section. And the minute he steps up on the back of this truck, he says, black power, we need black power, we need black power. Say we need black power. People, you know, repeat it. And of course, what happened from there is the news media defined black power for us and scared to death most of the black leadership. I mean, and what I felt was that what we had been doing in our regular voter registration efforts, we are telling people, register to vote. You will be able to have the power to elect the sheriff. You can elect the mayor. You can elect any office that we decide to run for. But we didn't never say black power, but power. We talked about power, but Stokely defined it for us. He said we need some black power. Now, right away, a lot of the people that I've got to work with back in the community kind of picked up that news media definition of what black power was, and it was fearful that we're going to take over. We're going to do to white folks what they've done to us. We're gonna take over, and we're just going to, So I asked Fannie Lou Hamer. Said, Ms. Hamer, what do you think about this Black Power thing? She says, Mac, said, we are black, poor people, been that all of our lives, and it means we want to have something to say about our destiny. So from that day forward, it's organizing, it's bring together, getting together. You remember, as a result, a lot of black movies started to come out, pride. It's about pride, and it's about education. It's about being able to live peacefully in your community and decide how your community is going to be, what the composition is going to be, how you're going to educate your children. So that's what it means to me.
Thank you, Mr. McLaurin. That was great. The cry in Greenwood for Black Power was about almost the midpoint of the march. It had started, of course, in Memphis, and then it detoured in Grenada, into the Mississippi Delta, so it took kind of a loop. And then it circled, by its third week, back onto Highway 51, and where it came to 51 was in Canton, Mississippi, where at the time you were Flonzie Goodloe, Dr. Flonzie Brown-Wright, was living at the time. And a couple days before the march arrived, you got a phone call. Can you tell us about that phone call?
Well, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Let me do this first, if I may. Let me give you a message from Mr. Meredith as of yesterday. He asked me to tell this group that you've read about him, you've heard about him, you've seen movies about him, but he asked me to tell you that what he did it for you. Let's hear it from Mr. Meredith. Everything he did it for you. We all know from history that what Mr. Meredith did began as a one-man walk against fear. Began in Memphis. He didn't want any news. I know him very well. Sold him a house 40 years ago. He didn't want any news media. He didn't want any group. He didn't want any singing. He didn't want any clapping and swaying. He wanted to just walk. He wanted to show, as Doctor has said, that in Mississippi during that period, a black man could, in fact, walk down a Mississippi highway without being harmed. That was one of his major goals. And, of course, to get people registered, because I was a part of that cause. But as you know, in Hernando, he was shot. And today, you may not know, there are 2 bullets still in his body. How many of you knew that? There are still bullets in his body today that cannot be removed because they are life-threatening. So it wasn't just one shot. It was several shots. And I was with him when we had a private dinner 2 weeks ago, and we were together. But even though we wear different labels, COFO, SNCC, LCLC, NAACP, our main thrust was getting this right to vote. I'm deviating, and I know I am. Well, I'm the oldest thing in the room. Age has privileges, right? That's what they told me. So even though we wear different labels, our common thrust was to get that right to vote and to use that right to the betterment of our people, to teach people that the way out of any quagmire politically, even today, is using the right to vote. So as the marchers came through the Delta areas, as Brother McLaurin has said, as they came through the Delta area, well, of course, after Mr. Meredith was shot, it switched from a walk to a march, because all of the leaders that you have just talked about, Dr. King, Floyd McKissick, Foreman, Farmer, all of the leaders came together because they felt they owed Mr. Meredith. They owed Mr. Meredith the right to continue what he began as a one-man band, if you will. And that's when it became a march. And the march came down through the Delta areas and on their way to Canton. 2 days before the marches got to my hometown of Canton, I received a call, a telephone call. And of course, we had no caller ID. Do y'all remember those days? We had no caller ID. And of course, Tyler Perry had not done those Mud Deer movies. So, I couldn't say hello. But anyway, telephone rang. I answered the phone. And I said, hello. He said, is this Flonzie Goodlow? And I said, yes, it is. I instantly remembered. I instantly knew who the voice was on the other end. He said, this is Martin King. I said, yes, Dr. King, how can I help you? He said, well, as you know, we're on our way to Canton. And I've been told that if I wanted to get something done in Canton, I needed to call you. Sir, how can I help you? Can you provide housing and food for 3,000 people? Well, without giving it a thought, I told him, yes, I can. And I said earlier, I had an opportunity to tell President Barack Obama face to face. So you thought you started, yes, we can, right? He said, well, I thought I did. I said, well, no. In 1966, I told Dr. King that, yes, I can. And I was confident that I could because our community was so cohesive. We worked together. We would have given our lives for each other, and we did. So I knew I could call Miss Mary down the street, cook an extra pot of peas. I could call Miss Willie Mae, cook another pan of cornbread. I could call Mr. Ernest Atkins, fix 10 more bologna sandwiches. And that's how, when those marches, those tired, hungry marches came to Canton, my hometown, we were able to feed them. Anybody who could fry an onion sandwich was called upon to cook. We had enough food to feed them. We had enough places to sleep them. The Catholic gymnasium was open for them to sleep. As I travel the country, I don't do it so much now, but I still teach and lecture. I tell every audience, I wish you could have been there. To see people sleeping in swings on porches. To see people sleeping in yards, front yards, backyards, on the back seat of a car, providing housing and food for those individuals. And then I had the opportunity, when Dr. King came, I had the opportunity to be his driver. And I drove him around Canton to show him our new Head Start centers, to show him our adult educational centers, to show him the churches that were supportive of us. And then he said to me, Flonzie, I want some soul food. I said, give me a minute. And I called my mother. She's gone now. But I called my mother. I said, Mother, can you cook some food for Dr. King and 7 of his entourage? She said, give me 1 hour. And in 1 hour, I took Dr. King to my mom and dad's home. And he and his members ate at my mom and dad's dining room table. That was thank you. Thanks for my mother and daddy. When you saw the documentary, very good, by the way. When you saw the documentary, you saw the tear gas, correct? I was in that tear gassing. That tear gassing took place in Canton, my hometown, because we anticipated a lot of unsettling dangers. Picture this. The night we all assembled at the McNeil Elementary School, picture highway patrolmen standing on top of the school building with their guns, their shotguns, pointed down toward us. The AR-15s. And by the way, I'm an FBI Academy graduate, and my weapon of training was an AR-15. And I can shoot it. I can shoot it. But just picture them standing on top of the school with their guns pointed down at us. And not only that, as we assembled on the school grounds, they encircled us. They were on the outer perimeters of all the black people, and white people too, who were there for that evening activity. And of course, I spoke on the flatbed truck. Others spoke on the flatbed truck, James Foreman, different ones. We had gotten permission to obtain a permit to assemble, but not a permit to erect the tents. There were 2 tents rolled up just adjacent to the school grounds, on the school grounds. We thought that if we could erect those tents, we could also sleep other people. And so as Stokely was making his remark, as you know, Stokely and Dr. King had different ways, different perceptions. Well, it's an age thing. It's an age thing. And they had different perceptions of how things could go. That's why I said earlier, we may have worn different tags, but our common denominator was to get that right to vote. So when Stokely was making his remarks, and he was fired up, because he had just gotten out of jail, I believe. He was fired up, so he just kept saying, we're going to pitch the tent. 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 And the voices got louder and louder and louder. And then he said, because look at all that black power that's out there. And as Dr. McLaurin had said, the media misconstrued for their own benefit to not only frighten black folk, but to further divide the black and white relationships that were being cultivated. Did you hear me? Yeah. To frighten black and white folk, to frighten black folk from being involved, and to frighten white folk for keeping us uninvolved. And so that slogan, first used in the Delta, was intensified in Madison County. So as we continued meeting that night, and when he jumped out the flatbed truck and ran to get those tents and started rolling out the tents, that's when the tear gas canisters flew from the top of the school and also on the ground. I was in that crowd. I don't wear short sleeves. I never wear short sleeves, because today I still bear the scars on this arm of being trampled, of being walked over, fallen on, and this arm still bears those scars. So I have a daily reminder. And if anybody has a reason to be a mad black woman, you're looking at her. But you can't carry hate. You can't carry hate, because hate will destroy you and not the one you hate. But I had to find a way now. Don't. I had to find a way, because my life was threatened every day. 2 o'clock in the morning, my phone ring. Nigga, we gonna kill you. Then they threatened to kill my children. And so, but I had to find a way to vent that, find a way to facilitate that, so that I would not carry in all of my years. I'm almost 84, y'all. What you say? Can I get a witness? I forget. I'm not on my comedy show, but anyway, I had to find a way to turn that negative energy into something positive. And so today, we take it as we find it and we leave it like it is. Bobby Blue Bland, y'all remember? Oh, y'all remember Bobby Blue Bland? So, but those days were some turbulent days. And I think, as somebody mentioned, the 1966 march, and I'll kind of leave you on this note. I've been lecturing, teaching all of these years. I'm a retired investigator. And when I get an invitation to attend something educational, inspiring, to the extent that I can, I take it. But I'm here today because I did get the invitation. Dr. Jones and I have been working close together. But let me tell you why I'm here. In 1966, sitting on the floor in the home of Mr. and Mrs. George Washington, in the presence of Dr. King, Andrew Young, Jesse Jackson, and all of the national figures, there were 12 local people, almost like disciples, sitting on the floor. When Dr. King told us about his death, when he told us, my days are numbered, I'm not going to be with you very long, and we will soon be gone from your community. But what I want the 12 of you to do, when you see discrimination, when you see separatism, when you see the ugliness of racism, that you would call it out. And as a 22-year-old young woman, a divorced mother of 3 children, I found myself standing. And I said, here am I, send me. And for 63 years, I've been on this wall. And I'm not tired yet. Not tired yet. So I made a vow. I promised Dr. King that I would be one of the ones to tell the story from personal experience. And then that inspired my campaign. In 1968, I must have been crazy. Can you imagine? In 1968, in Mississippi, a black woman running for office to unseat an incumbent who had occupied that position for 40 years. But the day that the registrar cussed me out and ran me out of the courthouse, I decided I'm going to get your job. And then when election time came, I didn't get his job. I got the job that supervised him. And I became the first black woman to be elected, not appointed, to a position in Mississippi, statewide, post or pre-Reconstruction. Because pre-Reconstruction, women couldn't vote. So I am your first, and I'm still here and still kicking. Still kicking. Now, there are days when I wake up, I have to say, what's today? My name is what? But anyway, I'm kidding. But the bottom line, everybody, on a serious note, the right to vote is precious. Our ancestors didn't have it. They couldn't go to school, y'all. We owe them. And if you don't want to vote, when people ask me, well, Dr. Wright, you know, voting doesn't do any good. Why should I vote? I tell them 2 things. First of all, if you don't vote, you still vote by default because you stayed at home and you gave somebody else your power. That's number 1. Then number 2, if you don't want to vote for yourself, vote for your ancestors who didn't have the opportunity. You know, people like Uncle Bubba, y'all know Uncle Bubba? You know, Uncle Shorty, you know, Aunt Sure, yeah, you know, Uncle Willie, cousin sister. Do y'all know them people? Y'all got folk in your family? Vote for them because they did not have the opportunity to vote. So you owe it to them to cast your vote. 80 million people did not vote in 2024. And so when people call me and say, well, Miss Flonzie, what happened? But did you vote? Well, Miss Flonzie, why are things going on up in Washington? Did you vote? Don't call me about nothing that goes on at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue if you did not vote, because you already knew what was going to happen if you listened. So now that's what I got to say about that. And I'm not apologizing, because I'm old enough and bold enough to say what I feel that I have to say to get your attention. Please, people, we got to vote. And it's so much more history that we could tell and talk about, but the main thing is we have got to not flex our power, but put people in office who will represent our interest. When we see today gas prices $5 a gallon, but I forgot. When we see, grocery prices, gas prices, young couples cannot buy homes. When we see school uniforms going up, everything is going up. Why? Because somebody did not pull the correct lever. Somebody did not circle in the right dot. And so I'm just resolved that I'm just not going back. You can do what you want to do to me. I can only die one time. I am not going back. And I may not have answered all your questions the way you thought I should have, or the way you asked them, but I'm almost 84. Thank you.
Dr. Wright, you answered all my questions and much, much more. Thank you. The march finishes from Canton. It goes to Tougaloo College, where Dr. Chamberlain has taught in the past, where there was a big rally the night before the final march, and that included Sammy Davis Jr. and Burt Lancaster, and Marlon Brando, and James Brown, and a number of people gathered there. And then the last day of the march was a Sunday. It was the largest civil rights demonstration in the history of Mississippi. 15,000 people marched to the state capitol to hear, at the back of the Capitol. The Meredith March is often told as, like the title of the film, the end of an era. It's called The Last March in a great book on the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement. It is the last time that the major civil rights organizations come together as one group in this common endeavor of a long march, like they did in Selma the year before, like they did in the March on Washington in 1963. And it certainly is told as part of the growing alienation of the civil rights movement from the federal government, right? There's a civil rights bill in 1966 that does not pass, and Lyndon Johnson is increasingly disassociated from the movement, as is Congress. So there's a national story there. Right? But it's also, as our panelists have really emphasized, it's a Mississippi story too, right? It's a local story. Dr. Chamberlain, you're a historian of Mississippi. You have taught in Mississippi institutions. You are finishing up your time at the Emmett Till Interpretive Center, where you bring that history to public audiences. How do we tell the story of the Meredith March as a Mississippi story? What does it mean within the state?
Thank you all for having me be here. And I want to say, please give Mr. McLaurin and Flonzie Brown-Wright another round of applause. Since I was a student at Tougaloo College, I have been sitting at the feet of these folks. So they've known me a very long time. So to be able to continue to hear and absorb this information and for them to share it with audiences like you all here in North Mississippi. Memphis is a part of North Mississippi, right? So it is an honor to be here with you all and also reconnect with my good friend Aram. But when I think about the Meredith March, and also just thinking about how it's not just a national story, but when you think about its connection to the state of Mississippi, the Meredith March was really a response to what happened 20 years earlier. When you think about political figures in all of our states, especially under the system of segregation, one name that comes to my mind is Theodore Bilbo. In 1946, he made a statement that the best way to keep a black person from going to the polls was to see him the night before. And in 1966, the March Against Fear was a response to that. What it was, of course, was to have fear from intimidation, fear from going to the polls. Of course, it was this culmination of things that came out of the Regional Council of Negro Leadership from the 1950s. Mr. McLaurin already spoke about the 1963 Freedom Vote. There was this common perception that black folk didn't want to have any parts of the political process. But what they did was to prove them wrong through the thousands of ballots that they participated in with this mock election. And of course, when we have the establishment of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, it was a culmination of all of those things. And even with that said, Dr. Goudsouzian just mentioned the fact that this was the last time you have major organizations like the NAACP, SCLC, CORE, SNCC come together. COFO had disbanded, the Council of Federated Organizations had disbanded in 1965. So this was a rekindling of the power that was demonstrated by this organization that only existed in the state of Mississippi. So you all hear that, like Alabama was SCLC, SNCC was heavy in Georgia, and you had all of these national civil rights organizations that had a foothold in many of the states across the American South. But in the state of Mississippi, COFO was the umbrella organization that brought all of these national organizations, regional organizations, and even indigenous organizations together to work for a common cause, which ultimately became the right to vote. So when we talk about the Meredith March and what it means to Mississippi history, you can't separate it from. It's a part of the civil rights narrative, but it's also this culmination of all of this much longer struggle for civil rights, for black rights. And when you think about James Meredith in particular, it's this fight for humanity, ultimately. But yeah, Mississippi is a very special place, a number of things that happened there, but when we talk about the March Against Fear, it was this fear to fight against absence or exclusion from the ballot. It was this fear to fight against poverty in the state of Mississippi, but it was also this fight for black empowerment and black consciousness, which emerged as a result of the Meredith March. So that's what I would have to say.
Thank you. We do have some time for questions from the audience, and those can come both from our virtual audience and from our physical in-person audience, and I think Ryan will be coordinating that for us.
Mr. Come to the podium. Yeah.
Good evening, good evening. I really didn't come to speak, but the only thing I wanted to say is that the Black Power movement has become the Black Lives Matter movement. The biggest takeaway that I want to give people, and I wish we had more young people in the audience, because you can be pro something without being anti something else. And that's the thing. You can be pro-black, but that does not make you anti-white.
We've got a question from the virtual, and this is for the panelists here. It was, how were the results of the March Against Fear different from the other marches of this contemporary era?
Forgot I had. This particular march, and when it started out, Roy Wilkins left that march because of the presence of the Deacons for Defense. And the Deacons for Defense, as you know, was an organization of men who was armed. And they had agreed to help to protect the marchers. So there was a watching the march and listening, there was just a different tone about this march. You know, the marches in the past had been, you know, turn the other cheek, get your head whooped, around hospital for people who were hurt. But this march this time was, the people were marching for a purpose. It was purpose involved here. and therefore they just wasn't going to take the head whoopings. And although, I don't think there was a lot of real violence other than the fact that Mr. Meredith was shot down, but this march ended an era of turn the other cheek.
I think that in 1966, we had the Civil Rights Act. We had the Voting Rights Act. And I testified before the subcommittee on the Voting Rights Act prior to its passage. I took with me to Washington thousands of forms where people had been denied the right to vote. So from 64 to 65, now 66, I think it was the boomerang that catapulted other organizations to believe that we could do something. I think it was the foundation after these laws, now that we finally had something on our side, now that we finally had something that had some teeth, even though it still took some folk a long time to understand that those laws were on the book. But I see it as people coming together again, very diverse, very different, but with one common cause, that we can make it. We can do it. We've been pressed down, bent down, thrown down, but now here's our chance to rise, and make a difference. That's how I see it.
And what I'll also add, because we do have audience members from Grenada here, is just in thinking about numbers. In 1960, only 5% of African Americans in the state of Mississippi were registered to vote. By the time of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, you had approximately 100,000, and it increased, it was not 100,000, but I'm sorry, 140,000 by that time, just going through Grenada for the March Against Fear. The numbers increased. People saw folks coming through and understood the purpose of the march and were getting registered to vote. And that led to its own movement. Ms. Freeland Foster, what do you all call it, how you all reference the movement in So the 1966 Grenada County Freedom Movement, so that's a really important part of not just the March Against Fear, but a part of Mississippi's civil rights history. But that gives you some data on how those numbers increased over time and how much of an impact this particular march had on getting blacks registered to vote in the state of Mississippi.
Okay, my name is Daphene McLaurin, and I'm the executive director of the Hooks Institute, in part working with Daphene for the trailer you all saw. And I'm really sorry to ask this question. You all have been the elders of the modern civil rights movement, but we're now facing a period where they have used the accomplishments of that movement to, in fact, dismantle the framework of the civil rights movement. So as you know, in Calais versus Louisiana, essentially eviscerated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, where you have to show intentional discrimination to challenge a gerrymandered district. I have done voter registration in Memphis, and what I've observed is that when I go into some neighborhoods, they feel like they have nothing to vote for. It's not a matter of going to the ballot and vote, but they don't see how government in any way has improved their living conditions. So how do we create what I would call, and I know this may be an unfair question, but a perfect storm? I see the modern civil rights movement as a perfect storm involving Dr. King and grassroots activists, et cetera, throughout the 1950s and 60s. So in this moment, the issue that I see is how do we engage our people and people sympathetic to the issues that impact minorities and marginalized communities to band together like they did in your period? How do we create the perfect storm?
Well, any way you look at it is hard work. You have to be willing to bite the bullet. Even though you may be turned down, turned back, People may be discouraged. And I do run into people who don't feel that they have anything to vote for. We are creative people. We are smart people. We have the ability. We just got to put it out. We've got to find a way. I spoke to a group of students from Alabama College 2 nights ago, and that was kind of one of the questions that they asked. And I told them, find your passion, or it will find you. Believe in what you're doing. If it's only nobody but you doing it, if you have to stand alone, it's hard. It was hard. It was hard then. It was hard for our ancestors to watch their sons being hung. It was hard. We were never welcomed in this country. We came to this country against our will. 3/5 of a human being. But we survived because of the intuitive foresight that our ancestors left us. It's hard work. And so I would just encourage you, ma'am, if it's only 2 of you, or 3 of you, and then the 3 of you may become 10 of you, then the 10 may become 20 of you. Let them know that as citizens of this country, that they have something to offer, something to give, and something to stand up for. And I know, I work with a lot of young people. I talk to them. And we are in a microwave society. You know, I see kids 2 years old got a cell phone and can't spell their name. So I'm saying, and I've heard parents say, well, I don't want my kids to have to go through what I went through. Well, look at me. I did pretty good. And my daddy made $15 a week and took care of 5 people. And my mother saved money and bought a home from $15 a week. Now, that was back in the day. So all I'm saying is that when you stop and think about the accomplishments, the gains, the little successes that our ancestors led us through, we owe them. We owe them to give back our very best. Because at the end of the day, when you lie down at night, you can say within yourself, I did my best. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with 1 step. Did that help you any? And you're already doing it. I can tell you're already doing that. But just keep doing it. You can't stop because it's your passion. It's not a fad. And you're not doing it because somebody like you or don't like you. You're doing it because you feel you have a mission. You've been called to do it. I didn't want to do civil rights. I wasn't going to jail. I wasn't going to be shot at, tear gas, ran off the road by the Klan. I've been all of that. But I didn't stop because I couldn't. Every time I thought about, well, baby, now look, you got them 3 kids. You're a divorced mother. Well, they threatened to kill them too. I couldn't stop because every time I wanted to retreat, something said, you got to go. You got to get back up there and dust your feet off, hold your head up high, and slang it, and keep on kicking.
My name is Shayla Karkera, and I've served on the board of the National Civil Rights Museum now for more than 20 years. I just want to say, we build on foundations we did not lay. We warm ourselves by fires we did not light. We drink from wells we did not dig. We enjoy the shade of trees we did not plant. We go up on your shoulders, and we are so grateful. My husband and I are immigrants. It's because you walked that doors opened for us. It's because you marched that walls were broken down, and we were able to come to this country and become citizens and enjoy the life that we have now. And we will forever be grateful. Thank you so much. I'm so honored that I'm able to say this to you personally, all of you here. Thank you.
I'm really not sure how to ask my question because I've been so busy this week with supporting the demand for justice for baby Cohen, the 1-year-old that was murdered by the police in Senatobia, Mississippi. So I haven't had time to really put all of this together. And the young lady who just left, where did she go? And so when you came up, it is where I don't really know what this question is. And I'm trying to connect it all. So next week, I'm going to try to sit down and connect all the dots together. But I do know there is a connection. Because see, you know, when we talk about the right to vote, we had that a long time ago. It was just that we were stopped. Violence and everything else that came in that stopped us from exercising that right. But when I'm still trying to connect all the pieces and get the question because it connects that here 60 years later, in the same month, in the month of June, that a child, 1-year-old child, could be murdered by a police officer. That's governance. A police officer comes under the supervision of the police department, which comes under the supervision of the city council, which is also connected to the state of Mississippi when you talk about police officers. And so 60 years later, it's kind of like we're in the same place. And I'm trying to connect it. And I need somebody to help me to connect it. Because this is 60 years later. We were not just marching to be able to vote. Because when I read, a lot of people were saying, freedom, 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 freedom. Because they were connecting it to other stuff. They were connecting it to, I believe I even read a statement in the book where Willie Rick said, we tired of white folks killing us. Something to that nature. And so today, I'm saying, seems like they still killing us. And I'm tired of it. So, and I know it's somehow connected to the fact that the vote, I'm like, what's happening? So even though I didn't articulate my question, I just need all of you all to know what I'm feeling. Because we are still doing this work. A lot of those young people, they're doing that very, very work. A lot of them. But then when something like that happens, then the rage comes. And I understand the rage. I understand the rage. So I guess similar to your question, my question is, then what do we do? I mean, I know what I'm doing. Like Dr. Wright says, I'm always on the battlefield. I'm not stopping. So I know what I'm doing. We're there to support. But at the same time, you know, where are the voices? Where is the national voice? Where is the state voice that's saying, this is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. Something is amiss here. And yes, people keep asking, was she shoplifting? And yes, I don't know whether she was or not. But I do know this. Shoplifting is a misdemeanor, and it does not carry a murder sentence. So again, I'm saying, you right, Doc, all of y'all, we still got a lot of work to do. So I just had to that helped me to just get that out.
As I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to hear some words from John Riley. He's one of the people behind the film where we saw the trailer at the beginning of today's event, End of an Era. So I'll turn it over to John.
Great. Thanks, Aram. You didn't give my title, though. I'm the executive producer. Got that? You got that? My wife's over there going, please get embarrassed about that title now. At least blush when you're saying it, okay? And you won't have to listen to me for long to know that I don't have a long resume in the movie-making business. I don't have a long one at all. I also want to thank, before I leave, Ryan and Russ for being such great stewards of the greatest museum in the whole wide world, right? Right. I want to thank Aram for his book and also for convening such a spectacular panel. And finally, I want to thank Davin Baptiste. Where are you? And Daphene McLaurin, because it was their efforts that have led us to this, what is an early stage of making the movie. We're just flooded with so much information. The question about the results of the march itself is, that could take volumes of movies and books to cover because it's such a complicated legacy. And you may be wondering, okay, well, why are you trying to master something like that when you don't have any experience making movies? Well, my attachment to the March Against Fear was when I was 8 years old. James Meredith walked right by my house on Highway 51 in Whitehaven on the corner of Richmond and what is now Elvis Presley Boulevard. And my dad walked out to him. My dad was not a bigot, but he was afraid. He walked out and shook Mr. Meredith's hand. They shared stories about faculty members because he had gone to Ole Miss. And so he, you know, it was a choosing time, right? And he did rise to the occasion. I learned in retrospect that my mother, I think, had probably had a big part in him screwing out the courage to go and do it, because she had had it with Medgrabbers and Emmett Till and the workers in Philadelphia. You know, you got to get out there, Dr. George, and you got to do it. And so we did. And I want everybody here to know that your efforts have not been in vain. And that, you know, it was transformative, especially for my brother, who was a little bit older than I was. I mean, I thought I was going to see a civil rights parade, you know, with batons and floats and things, but it had a profound effect on him, and he certainly paid it forward in his life. So those are the reasons we're behind this movie, and we have a long way to go. I want to make sure that any of you who haven't had contact with me, please get in contact with me so that you can begin sharing your stories. We're going to be collecting these stories and, you know, all the things that could help support Aram's wonderful book. We have a long way to go, just like we do with civil rights in this country. Mark Twain had a quote. He said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes." And 2026 rhymes with 1966, when you can have a Supreme Court rule that you can revoke temporary protected status and that it's not about race. That's basically what the court said. It's not about race. Julian Bond said, color blindness doesn't mean being blind to the consequences of color. And that's what we face. So let's keep up the good fight. We have to preserve this, not for nostalgia's sake, but because of all the lessons that it can teach people. Because, you know, my folks need help, right? And if it wasn't for people like you, I probably would have grown up a redneck segregationist, okay? So we need you to make sure that you don't lose hope and that you help us with these stories. So I would welcome you to come and see me or get in touch with me, and I will keep you appraised of the progress of the movie as we go forward. Thanks.
So we've heard many stories today. Like many stories about the civil rights movement, they tend to inspire us, and they tend to ground us, and they tend to let us know about the work that we still all have to do. They speak to the humanity, our common humanity, and they also speak to the distinctions in our experiences, right? That these are all constant lessons of the civil rights movement, and stories that are told here every day, and are told to an incredibly vast and diverse audience. And they're stories that our esteemed panelists continue to share. So I would like you to join me in thanking our panelists for being with us today. And please know that Dr. Wright will be signing books in the back at the conclusion of our event.
Yes, thank you, Dr. G, and thank you again, panelists. Thank you all for coming to the National Civil Rights Museum. If you've not visited our new addition to the museum, the Legacy Building opened this past May, so please connect this story and so many others to bring us full circle to today. As Dr. G stated, Dr. Brown-Wright's book, Looking Back and Ahead, as well as his own books, Man on a Mission and the book on the March Against Fear itself, Down to the Crossroads, are available here in our gift store, and they'll both be available to sign. Thank you again for supporting the museum.